Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. As you may know if you've been around for a little while, or not, you might just be aware of this kind of side of YouTube, but some of the most controversial videos I've ever made in my entire YouTube career, I guess you could say, were on incels and MGTOW. These videos resulted in me getting regular rape and death threats, which was incredibly unpleasant. To this day, I still get the most misogynistic and disgusting and insulting comments over and over and over on those videos. One particular group, I remember, I think this was from the incel video, even tried, well, they didn't try, they did. They started collecting information on me and my boyfriend at the time and putting together things like his employer's name, his work email address. They started piecing together clues from my Instagram account to try and figure out where exactly in London I lived, because one of them said he wanted to throw acid in my face, which is always lovely. So, these videos I don't make lightly, you know, not after that reaction. It was actually terrifying, but it did make me realise just how important I think it is to talk about these topics and to not be silenced. The more men who respond to people calling out their, you know, blatant misogyny and extreme views with more misogynistic name-calling and literal threats and blatant lies about science. Like apparently how women absorb the DNA of men that they sleep with, so the more sex we have, the more masculine we become. Literally no truth in that, it's ridiculous. And yet they spout it as fact. Anyway, the more men that do things like this, the more justified I feel in continuing to call out their harmful narratives. That said, I don't just want to call out men for this kind of behaviour, because women can do it too, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is why I have in the past spoken about certain groups of radical feminists who I disagree with. I am very much a feminist myself, but there are radical feminists who I do disagree with, and I'll be vocal about that. I've also made videos on the female dating strategy subreddit, which I think is absolutely toxic and incredibly harmful and full of some really bad ideas. And this month I've been kind of exposed or introduced to a new area of the internet with a very similar group who, they don't make me as angry, they just make me sad, if that makes sense. And that is the world of Femcels. So basically the female equivalent of incels, despite the fact that apparently incels and Femcels pretty much hate each other, which is fun. Now, I first actually read about this in Elle magazine this month, which claims that the term incel was actually coined in 1997 by a woman known as Alana, who created the Involuntary Celibate Project as a source of comfort and support for lonely, hurting people, which sounds pretty lovely in that. Yeah, fine. Alana has since distanced herself from the community, but 24 years later, Femcels have taken her concept full circle and created a space that honours a female perspective, which again doesn't sound too awful at the moment. The article also pointed out some of the main differences between the views of incels and Femcels. It says, the Femcel and incel communities appear not to get along, in part because the latter doesn't believe the former can exist. All women, many incels say, have the choice to be sexually active or not. So-called Femcels are just being too picky in their mind. While most women would probably not identify as involuntary celibate, many can relate to the frustrating experience that they should prefer awful sex to no sex at all. And they might even recognise their worst dates in the observations of a pink pill user named Feeling Very Blue, who writes, a woman can get sex if she has next to no standards, doesn't care about whether or not she has an orgasm, and doesn't mind being used as a human fleshlight. Which again, yeah, that's something we can all relate to. And this idea of choosing not to have sex over choosing to have bad sex is something that I respect and can get behind. This is fine. So I decided to explore some of the Femcel forums in much the same way as I did the incel forums in that video like 3 years ago, maybe. And so that's what we're going to be doing today in this video. I literally went about this in the same way I went about the incel video, in which I just go through the forum chronologically and just kind of chat about posts that interest me and share my thoughts. Just before we jump into the video though, I just want to take a moment to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion, because I always forget to do this stuff and I'm really, really bad at it. So if you want to keep up to date with all the latest stuff with me, you can go follow me on Instagram. My username is Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O, because my name was taken and I'm annoying like that. If you want to support my channel, you can do over on Patreon, where you get extra kind of photos that I've taken, especially behind the scenes stuff, and Kyra. You also get access to script notes and video notes and things like that. And there's a Discord server you can go and chat with other people on as well. You can join for as little as like £1 or $1 a month. So it's really not expensive. Just every little helps supporting me and my work. And you get to chat with some nice people, and yeah, hopefully it's nice. Other thing is, over on my website now I've added loads of new like paintings and content and stuff like that, so you can go and browse basically my favourite art and craft and photography and writing projects from the last 10 years. Like my favourite little highlights of everything that I've done are all there to browse for free on my website if you want. And if you see anything you like, I also have a selection of hand-typed and personalised, like I do like personalised hand drawings on each of them. Poetry for you to buy if you want. I also have like a limited edition series of handmade lino prints that I've done, that I designed and carved and printed all by myself, which was really, really fun to do. And I've also got my photography prints on there and some art prints that I'm going to be adding today, which I'm really excited about. I wasn't sure about doing art prints because I've never really felt like my art was good enough, but recently I've been like playing around with these really fun cartoon animal paintings. Like I literally have them right here. I feel like I'm on Art Attack now. So I've got like my little flamingo boy, and then I've got some bigger ones. So I've got little handsome giraffe with his little bow tie looking all handsome. And then I've got my happy little bee, who's a gorgeous boy. I've got these, and then I have like more abstract things as well, and some of my little watercolour animals and stuff like that, and flowers and all sorts. A few people messaged me on Instagram asking about prints, so I've added a couple to my website if there's something that you like and you're interested in. But as always, no pressure, they're just there if you want to check them out. The website's just racheloates.uk. That's RACHELOATES.uk. And yeah, there you go. Shameless self-promotion out of the way. Thank you! I'm really bad at this stuff. Basic thoughts from looking through the Femcel forums. I will say that there doesn't seem to be quite as much externally directed hate and anger on here as there was on the incel forums at the time, but there are still a lot of strong emotions being fostered, and it does create this echo chamber, which I do think is overall damaging, and kind of they almost egg each other on in their misery, which I think is a really harmful thing to encourage. I actually understand a lot of what both incels and femcels feel. I understand that like it can be so lonely and you feel so hurt and rejected and you just want to cling on to support in any way you can. I completely understand what that's like, and I've been through it myself. And like I said before, I fully support people who have enough self-respect to say things like, I'd rather be with no one than the wrong person. That takes a really, really strong person to identify and understand and live, and I think that's excellent and should be applauded. However, what bothers me is, again, like I said, a lot of the content on these forums seems to be focusing more on assigning kind of outside blame for your problems and taking personal responsibility, and that's never going to lead to solutions. That's only ever going to lead to more anger and misery, and that's something that I do kind of have a bit of an issue with. It's like, yes, we can acknowledge that the world isn't perfect, and I'm more than willing to concede that, and I'm more than willing to concede that sometimes there are ideologies perpetuated that are incredibly harmful, and sometimes there are power structures in place which are oppressive. I will absolutely acknowledge that, and while we absolutely need to acknowledge these before we can fight against them, I also think that this isn't just achieved by just blaming them for all your problems and being bitter and angry about it and just kind of wallowing in that misery. I do think that often as an individual you need to take a more proactive approach. You're in charge of yourself and your life and how you respond to the things around you, including the injustices around you, and that's the only way you are really going to grow and move forward. You can't fight the big power structures if you're just kind of wallowing in misery about them, you know? It might sound a little hyperbolic, but I think a lot of the time these communities just breed more hatred, and this is true of not only the femcel forums but the incel forums and, you know, subreddits like Red Pilled and the female dating strategy one and all these other ones. I think a lot of the time in these communities people get so stuck in their little echo chambers, and when you get a bunch of angry, hurt people together in one place without any kind of, I guess, happier people or more fulfilled people like guiding them out of it, they all just tend to kind of wallow in their anger, and I think it does more damage than it helps. And this is why I think certain forums like this are a problem and worth talking about. Forums supporting each other are great when they're about sharing experiences and saying, here's what helped me, maybe you could try XYZ. But when they just become a bunch of hurt people kind of angrily shouting at the world and sort of egging each other on and ramping up their anger instead of calming it down and kind of trying to outdo each other in terms of who's more miserable, I think that can be a very, very dangerous thing. I think one post that really exemplifies this was called Friendships and General Human Interaction, and it opened with the poster saying, I give up on both fronts. And I actually related to so much of her post, and I saw a lot of my younger self in a lot of what she wrote, and I just kind of wanted to give her a hug and tell her things were going to be okay and get better, and just tell her all the reassuring things I wish someone had told me at the time. And a lot of the comments were just kind of agreeing with her and saying, you know what, you're absolutely right, just give up hope like we all have. Like one of the comments says something like, we're doomed really. You get a limited set of people to make friends with, and if they don't like you, it's either that or be alone. And one, that's completely wrong, and two, it's so defeatist and completely the wrong attitude to have, and I don't think it's helping either person in this conversation. So let me read you a couple of extracts from the original post. There was a very clear hierarchy in my past friendships, and I was at the bottom, mainly because of lookism. Regardless, there was no consideration for my feelings, as there often wasn't in my friendships, because my feelings never mattered, because I'm always pegged as someone not deemed worthy of respect, vis-a-vis my appearance. The same friends that would swear at me, tell me to shut up, make comments about my body, and generally be disrespectful towards me, would suddenly lose the attitude and be all laughs and giggles when someone prettier or more popular was around. So clearly this person has been around absolutely incredibly toxic, horrible people, and I know exactly what this is like. I know exactly what it feels like to be like the ugly friend that no one takes seriously and no one's interested in, because that was me for like most of my life. I know what it's like to have people who are supposed to be your friends treat you like crap and constantly put you down, and it's horrible. It's just the worst feeling in the world. I spent more time in my life crying over people like this than I care to admit, but as I've got older, I've learned, thankfully, that not everyone is like this. It's only certain people who are, and it's more than okay to cut them out of your life. When people treat you badly, it is absolutely okay to walk away. Don't let anyone treat you like this, because it is better to be temporarily alone than to have bad friends. There are so many good people out there who will not treat you like this. You just have to find them. And it took me a very long time to find some like real friends. And I was in my like mid to late 20s before I met people like Daisy and Carrie Ann and Melinda. And it's taken like years to sort of build up a real friendship with them where I feel like I can trust them completely. And they're all incredibly like beautiful, talented, smart women who in the past I would have been insanely intimidated by and probably not even approached because I didn't feel good enough. But I gave them a chance, and I gave myself a chance, and I got to know them, and they are the loveliest people I know in the world. They are wonderful. They're the nicest people I've ever met. They help me feel comfortable in myself. They never pass up an opportunity to like build me up or each other, or just kind of like help each other out. And that's what good friends do. That's what good people do. I've never once felt insecure around them. I've never once felt like they belittled me. I've never once felt unwelcome with them. They're wonderful people. And what I'm saying is there are people out there like that. You need to find them and search for them. And I know it can be hard, but a big part of it is just realizing and remembering that you are worthy of love and respect, and you are deserving of that kind of friendship, and allowing yourself to open up to it. That's the first big step, really. The poster goes on saying, with the way my mental health is now and has been for quite some time, I can't create healthy boundaries with people, so typically end up being depressing or annoying. I'll raise my hands and admit that I come on too strong, among many other things, and whether that's purely because of emotional instability, or because I don't know how to act like a normal person due to chronic social isolation and the fact I've been constantly picked at since I was able to walk and talk, that I'm so self-conscious I literally have to think about the amount of eye contact I give and the amount of times I blink and how I walk. Again, I understand this completely. This was me. This could literally have been written by past me. But before I comment on this, I also want to link it to what she says a little bit later, which is, like, my actual life is very depressing, femceldom aside, believe it or not. Very dysfunctional family that affected me a lot for the worse. I'm poor, but it's the government's, not mine. And the government can take it away from me when it wants. I don't quite know what that means. I'm not stable enough to hold down a job, and my life generally is very unhappy, and there's always something outside my control happening to me, and people don't like that. Again, this could literally have been me. I'm not gonna lie, seeing videos of people going out with their friends does make me sad, but the sadness is quickly replaced by bitterness, because even if I had friends, it wouldn't be a friendship like that. And this is the part that really, really kind of like hit home with me and hit me hard, because I always feel like this too, especially that last line. Even with some wonderful friends in my life, I still feel sometimes like I'm doing something wrong, and like I'll never have friends like other people do. Like I'll always be an outsider, and sometimes I have a good cry over this because it does hurt a lot. But one thing that really, really kind of helped me understand all this a little more has been going through my process of getting my autism diagnosis, because like I've always struggled to like maintain friendships, especially for like long periods of time. And the diagnosis and the process and stuff has kind of helped me understand why. Because it's not that there's something inherently wrong with me, or that I'm just like unlikable, or that there's something kind of broken in me. It's just that my brain works a little bit differently to most people. And that means that my friendships with certain people, especially like neurotypical people, are just a little different to the kinds of friendships that you might see on TV or something like that. So I can't expect to have the same experiences as neurotypical people because I'm not. And once I kind of like accepted this, I was like, oh, there's not just one way to have a friendship, there's many. So I need to kind of find the right one that works for me. So I've been working to like understand myself and my brain a bit more, and like figuring out ways to interact with people and what certain things they do mean and how the best way to like respond to those are. And I've been kind of thinking to myself, like, what is it that I want from a friendship? Not what is expected of me, not what does society see friendship as, not what do I think friendship should be, or what have I seen friendship portrayed as in the media. I don't think about that. I just think, what do I want out of a friendship? What will work for me? And then I've been pursuing that, and it makes everything a lot better. Honestly, it's makes me a lot happier. It makes my friendships more meaningful. And yeah, that kind of change in attitude has sort of really changed my life for the better. It's been really good. The post ends by saying, I feel like the ship has sailed on me having deep female friendships where we feel sisters. The most I can hope for is someone to go out with every now and again, and then to a restaurant or the cinema, and never talk about anything too deep or personal. And to be honest, my head is so effed up at this point that even that likely wouldn't work out. So I give up. I can't manage to be a good friend. People are typically awful towards me anyway, and by the time I'm stable enough to start making friends with people, I'll likely be well in my 30s. I've known it was over for me for a while, but it's still crappy that my life had to be this way. To which I just have like a million things to say. Oh my god. So, as always, there's no time limit on this stuff. This is the first thing I want to point out. There's nothing wrong with being in your 30s and still making new friends. I say this as a 28-year-old woman who is edging closer and closer to 30 every day. Yay. I know I always get like a little jealous when I see people who have had these like amazing close friendship groups, like since they were teenagers or at uni or something like that, and they still all hang out together or whatever. Yeah, that makes me a little jealous sometimes, and it does make me a little insecure sometimes. But I work through that and I get over myself, and I realise that I'm literally only 28 and I have the entire rest of my life ahead of me. I've only done a small portion of it so far. We need to stop acting like life stagnates at 25 and that like whatever you have then you need to stick with forever, because that is just not true at all. It's ridiculous to even think that. Like, as you get older, your life changes and you discover more about yourself and you try new things and you meet new people and you go new places, and sometimes you will just have kind of temporary friends who are in your life for a few days or weeks or months, and sometimes you meet someone who you just click with and they become like a lifelong friend. And either way, it's all good. There's no time limit on this, there's no over. If one ship does sail, it's okay, because there's just going to be another one along in 5 minutes. They are way more regular than buses, trust me. I actually saw a great post the other day on Reddit from this woman who, she was great, and I can't remember the context of the post exactly, but she said something like, I'm 50 now, and even if I meet a man tomorrow and we immediately get married, that's still probably another 30 to 40 years I have to spend with him. That's a long time. And I was like, oh yeah, like that is a long time. And so she was like basically saying like, people are saying my life's over because I'm 50, and she's like, hell no, I've got a lot of it left, you know. And I thought that was a really good way of looking at things, and a really kind of encouraging way of looking at things. And she was one of these people who was just like, you know, relationships work for as long as they work, and when it's over, it doesn't have to be like a bad thing, and it doesn't have to be like your life's over. And I really appreciated that, and I liked reading her post a lot. Anyway, back to this post on the forum. Reading it, I get it. And I understand a lot of what she's feeling, and I don't judge her a bit for feeling this way, but I do think she needs help and encouragement and a message of hope, not an echo chamber pity party from everyone else who's also given up in the comments. I don't think it's healthy or helpful at all. So like one reply, the one we mentioned earlier, was, we're doomed really, you get a limited set of people to make friends with, and if they don't like you, it's either that or be alone. I talk and avoid online to people I know IRL who never extended friendships. They tolerate me. I see them hang out with their other friends. A little bit later, Deep, meaningful, lasting friendships of any kind that last a life, and where the other person reciprocates that desire to hold you in their lives, are as mythical to me as a deep romantic relationship with a man. And again, I understand what it's like to feel this way, but I don't think these kinds of comments are helpful. They just create this cycle of bitterness and resentment, and it helps no one involved in the conversation at all. OP then responds back with a story about how she had a friend once, but it didn't work out because she felt she was being too clingy, and then the friend got annoyed at her, and OP didn't like the way she was spoken to, and then she shows like a huge amount of resentment towards her ex-friend and others when she says that, and as I said, most 20-year-olds don't have crap lives. They have decent families that they can rely on financially and aren't abusive, and I didn't have that. And I do think that made her feel guilty, which eventually turned into resentment, because it was like some Pavlovian conditioning where being around me would make her feel bad. Like her dad still paid for her phone bill at our big age. So much of your life ahead of you. You have so much growing and changing to do. Like, I can guarantee at 20 years old, you're going to be an entirely different person in a year to where you were like before. So imagine where you're going to be at like 30, 40, 50 and so on. It's just, but again, I get it. And I know exactly what this feels like, especially with the family stuff, because I remember being like 18 and when I first went to uni, and I was seeing all these people who had parents who like wanted to come visit them and did come visit them, or parents who were like helping them out financially, and families who paid for stuff, and I just felt like incredibly isolated and alone and different from anyone else, because like my parents visited me twice in the 5 years I was at uni, and like I say, like I don't take money off them. I haven't since like I got a job at 14, and I basically like looked after myself financially since. So yeah, I did feel a little out of place when I first got to uni, and I did feel a little bit jealous of all these like amazingly supportive families and like parents who talked to their kids and like genuinely seemed interested in them and proud of them. But that's not everyone else's fault for having a good life. That was my issue to work on, so I did. So I worked with a counsellor, I worked through a lot of those feelings, and I realised that just because other people have more of something than I do, that in no way reflects on me. It's not my fault. It's not that I'm lesser in some way or worse or whatever. It's just different, and I just have to approach things in a different way, you know? It's not that they deserve a family more than I do. It just means that they were luckier. And yeah, it can be frustrating for me, but feelings of anger and resentment won't get me anywhere. Like, those feelings are normal and they can be difficult to overcome, but the important thing is that you realise that they aren't healthy for you and you do work to try and overcome them. That's the important thing, and that's what I did. Another commenter replied with, "Too relatable, this is how and why I'm in my 30s and I'm friendless. Not because I never wanted friends or tried, I was never enough. I'm good with being alone, the pain just ain't worth it, I've never been worthy." And then she talks about a friend she had once, saying, "She would humiliate me because she could. She was a covert narcissist obsessed with status, and in front of her preferred friends, I would be used as some object to show what type of person or thing was beneath her. She kept me around to make her look better. The ugly, non-threatening, pathetic, lonely sidekick, always begging for scraps of her time, the lopsided friend poop. It was just another form of bullying." And this absolutely is a form of bullying, yes, absolutely. But you have to remember, this reflects on her and her insecurities, not on you. All that said, I do think there are a few posts which do some good, like this one which asks, "Do you know of older single women who have never paired up but are living their best life? I've noticed that oftentimes we are seeing older women on their own. They are usually divorced, have adult children, things like that. Like they've checked the boxes and glad to be free of them. How about women who never paired up? Be it in media or your personal lives. People joke about women buying homes and compounds to share, but wondering if this is something you've already witnessed in action. Are the women happy?" Which I think is an absolutely fair question, and there are some good answers on this thread too, because they spoke about being fulfilled without ever needing a man and stuff like that, which I think is great. So one person says, statistically, women without men are much happier and healthier. The exact opposite can be said about men. While another offers an anecdote about her aunt, which reads, "My aunt, she got a fair amount of male attention as well, but it was just never something she really wanted, and she never wanted kids either. She occasionally took stabs at dating in her 40s and 50s, but the guys always wanted to make it more serious than she did, so she stopped. She owns a house which she rents out and lives in a pretty nice city apartment. She has travelled pretty extensively as well. I will say that our extended family is very close, and she does spend a lot of time with my other aunt and her family. But then it just kind of devolves into a little bit more kind of like drama and pity and self-loathing with comments like, I think the happiest among those women have families, of course, walk to the park, grandchildren, safety, companionship, and someone to look after them, which is just a bunch of crap. Another one says, at least when unattractive women become mothers, they are slightly elevated in the social hierarchy, but childless and unattractive women stay at the bottom their entire lives unless they are extremely intelligent. Ridiculous. I know having kids and grandkids would never make me happy, and I hate people perpetuating the idea that women need a family to feel fulfilled, that women need kids to make them better, to make them real women, to elevate their status. It's ridiculous and insulting and disgusting. A post that I have like seriously mixed feelings about is this one titled Body Dysmorphia. It's a difficult one. I hate this diagnosis with an effing passion, and I don't see it remaining in future DSM editions. It is truly complete and utter BS that is of no use other than to qualify for disability welfare if your country allows it, and to torment those who have the misfortune of being diagnosed with it. I think it would be less insulting and psychologically distressing if they would just create an effing diagnosis that acknowledges that ugliness and deformities can have a significant impact on mental well-being, rather than treating the recognition of the overwhelming antagonism one faces as an irrational fixation. I am ugly and I know it, and it makes my life hard because society doesn't like ugliness. What is so wrong with that? Why does saying those words send psychologists into a frenzy of desperately saying BS platitudes that do nothing other than stroke the ego of the person spouting such nonsense? Spoiler, it's because society is incapable of producing empathy for ugly people. They have more sympathy for an unstable, attractive person than they do people with actual flaws and deformities that are depressed or insecure. If what they say is true, that despite the overwhelming ugliness they claim to have, they still magically manage to have an SO and patient family and friends that shroud them in compliments, with some of them even claiming to have complete strangers go out of their way to come up to them and talk about how beautiful they are, yet still think they're ugly. That is textbook psychosis or schizophrenic-induced delusions as far as I'm concerned. But if this illness is solely for deluded attractive people, which is what it seems like despite actual ugly people on forums fighting to add on that people with deformities can have the illness too, can you please have the effing decency to acknowledge that and create a separate diagnosis for people who have objective flaws? Because you're sending us into an early grave from the level of stress and invalidation we feel from constantly being gaslighted and spoken over by therapists and the deluded pretty people who tell us we have no place in our own community. Because ugliness isn't just looking in the mirror and not liking what you see. Ugliness is a life of ridicule, rejection, and isolation that turns you into a social handicap, which turns you into a social handicap, which then compounds on the level of spite you have to deal with on a daily basis. Ugliness is putting on pounds of makeup only be able to wear certain types of clothes so as to not offend other people, having to wear various undergarments, always making sure you're dolled up even with the most mundane tasks, and never being able to lose the shock from finally being treated like a human being in your new fake skin. I don't think there will ever be a point in my life where people being anything other than completely horrid towards me won't have me taken aback, only for it to quickly be replaced by the feeling of bile rising in my stomach, because I know they're only being nice because I look like something that's akin to pretty. And that as much as I despise it, I'm so deprived of warmth, love, and affection that cheap, worthless fakeness is like a hit of methamphetamine, and I'll do anything, steal or loan any amount of money, inject whatever material or substance into my body, and deprive myself of food just so I can afford to look like whatever I need to in order to receive it. So, I know that was a lot. That was like, yeah, I have so many thoughts. So on the one hand, I don't like her dismissiveness of people with body dysmorphia because it is an incredibly serious thing. I also don't like her throwing around terms like psychosis or schizophrenic-induced delusions. That's incredibly problematic. There's so much to unpack here, and I do genuinely feel sorry for her and the way she feels about herself, but the anger in this post is just a lot. I didn't read out a whole swearing rant in the middle because I felt like that was just a bit much. I do feel sorry for this woman, not because she may or may not be ugly, but because her levels of bitterness and self-hatred are really, really sad to see, and I'd like to see her turn that around. I and I know people on these forums won't like me saying this, but I absolutely despise when people use terms like ugly as some objective measure, because it's something I used to do, absolutely, about myself often. Like, I had real issues where I would spend hours in the mirror, like, staring at my teeth, my overbite, my skin imperfections, scars on my face and my body, my hairline, my sticky out bones, these horrible line wrinkles in my face that I'm repulsed by. I'd create lists of things that I hated. I knew my face and my body inside out because I could pick out the flaws just everywhere, and I hated myself. And then, weirdly, I started YouTube, and I started noticing that I got as many people telling me that they were repulsed by my appearance as I did telling me that they thought I was beautiful. And I realised that neither of them are right. It's not an objective thing. I'm not objectively ugly or objectively pretty. I just am. It's just me. And some people are going to think one way and some people are going to think the other, and none of that really matters. It matters what I think of me. And there are still days when I find myself incredibly ugly. There's also days when I'm kind of happy with how I look and I'm okay with it and I accept it. And I'm like, yeah, I feel quite good today. And that's the only thing that really matters. Everything else is all completely subjective. Nothing makes me objectively or inherently ugly or beautiful. And even if it did, so what? When people ask me what I like about myself, I immediately go to things like my intelligence and my creativity and how passionate I get about certain projects. They're the things I love about myself, and they're where I derive my worth from, and they're what I tend to focus on, and they're what I think people like about me as well, because my appearance is going to change over the years, and it does change all the time, and some days I'll look better than others. All of this is just temporary. You know, I mean, like, I can dye my hair pink, but the roots are still going to grow out. I can brush my teeth, but they're still going to need doing again at the end of the day. I can put as much anti-wrinkle cream on my face as I want, but it's still going to age over time. Everything is just completely temporary. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. You know, my hair might look horrible if I cut it short, but that's okay because it grows out again. You know, all these things change constantly, and no 2 days are the same, and you look different all the time. And that's why I think it's so much healthier to focus on your personality and deriving your worth from there rather than just your looks, which are always going to be changing. They're never going to stay the same. You're never going to stay one standard of beauty, whether you think that's up here or down here. It's constantly going to be in flux, because that's just what happens with humans. Also, this fly is very annoying. Sorry about him. That said, I do, again, understand where she's coming from, and I know how easy it is to get hyperfixated on what we consider to be physical flaws in ourselves. So I have very mixed feelings about how to respond to this post. It's difficult. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one down in the comments, because I have a lot of feelings and I can't quite put them into words. I'm still working through this one. And then there are just some posts which just make me full angry, like the one titled, "I can't stand human beings, but especially men," in which a commenter replied with the incredibly transphobic line, "Literally why men transition to women. They legit think we have it easier, even as they make our lives unbearable. This is disgusting and there's no excuse for it, and I don't care how angry and upset you are. Don't be a transphobic douchebag." Simple as that. What is really interesting to me, though, is throughout this entire forum, I just saw so much internalized misogyny. So when those 3 years ago or whatever, I was looking into the incel forums, there was so much blatant misogyny. This is very obvious. And it was all like, oh, it's all women's fault because insult, insult, insult. And women are trash because insult, insult. And everything like that. And it was like, I'm unhappy because women. The world is terrible because women. Women are awful because they're women. You know what I mean? It was all very obvious. It was out there. Everything anger-wise was directed at women. But on this one, it was interesting because there was some posts critical of men, but on the whole, there wasn't much man-hating in general. Most of the kind of like anger seemed to actually be directed towards other women that they perceived as being prettier than them or more successful than them or whatever. It all kind of came back to jealousy and internalized misogyny, you know, holding women up to these standards that patriarchal societies and misogynistic men have imposed rather than anything helpful. You know what I mean? And again, I can kind of understand where it's coming from. So jealousy is such a huge regular feeling when you're insecure about yourself. I completely get that. But from my own personal experience, I would say one of the best things I've ever done in my life is teaching myself not to compare myself to other people, especially other women, because it does just lead to misery. Everything in life is so subjective, especially like how we view other people and how other people view us and how other people view other people and so on. So comparison really isn't helpful. You can't look at two women and say objectively, well, she's more successful, she's better at this, she's doing better than... You can't objectively do that because everyone has different standards for what is successful, what is happy, what is beautiful, you know? So, like, example, I'm going out with like a bunch of girls this weekend and I'm incredibly nervous about it. So it's like an old friend's birthday drinks and she's asked me to come along. And I say old friend, we knew each other when we were like 7 and then we like drifted apart and then we didn't see each other for like 12 years, but we weren't friends for years before that. So it's like a whole thing. So basically it took like, I don't know, 20 years for us to reconnect, and then we finally did, and it turns out we get on great, and she's wonderful and lovely and really nice, and we have a good giggle together. So she's invited me for birthday drinks, and it's with a bunch of women, and I'm very nervous. I'm very, very nervous, because, like, just kind of glancing at them on Instagram, they're all these, like, stunningly beautiful, successful women who are super happy, and old me would have been incredibly intimidated by that. I would have felt so out of my depth, and so, like, inferior to all of them. But now I'm just like, they seem cool. I'm kind of happy to make new friends. It's quite exciting. And the thing is, a lot of us have very, very different lives. So for a few of them, they're like married and they have babies and they're like focusing on the whole family thing. A few of them have these kind of like regular 9-to-5 jobs and careers and stuff that they're focusing on there. None of them do what I do, like kind of being weirdly self-employed and doing the whole YouTube thing and stuff like that. And it's okay. There's still no comparison. There's not one of us who's going to be more successful than the others. We're all just going down very different paths. And while someone might look at like me, who's child-free by choice and living alone, and compare me to, say, like one of the women who is married with a baby and, like, you know, living in this house that she's bought with her husband and stuff, and people might look at us next to each other and compare us. And one person might be, like, incredibly jealous of Emma, being like, she has everything, she's the happy one, and they'd, like, pity me, being like, oh, she has nothing. A completely different person might come along and be like, damn, Rachel has everything, she has independence and freedom, and she's great and doing this and blah, blah, blah. Emma, she's stuck at home with a baby, isn't she? And they might look at her with pity. So it's completely subjective, like, what these standards are and what people consider successful or not. When the truth is, we're both successful because we're both doing exactly what we want in our lives. I'm living the life that I chose and that I want and that I'm aiming for. I'm very, very happy in that. And so is Emma. There's no need to compare because we're both content. And I think it's important to remember that it's the same when it comes to looks. There's no one objective beauty standard at all, as much as the media likes to tell you there is. There really isn't in the real world. People comparing me and another woman might think I'm completely hideous and she's stunningly beautiful, and then another person comes along and they're like, actually, she's alright, she's not so much my type. Again, all very, very subjective. I know there are like patterns and rules and stuff, and as the women on these forums like to quote a lot, there are lots of like studies show that so-and-so prefers X feature in women, or people think so-and-so is more beautiful than so-and-so. But, and I've said this before when I've gone on rants about like statistics and data sets and stuff like this, you have to remember that these are only talking about averages, and there are still outliers, and you have to look at the data sets as a whole. So let's imagine you show people pictures with everyone from like a tiny like 1-inch nose to like a big 10-inch nose. I have no concept of size. This is all hypothetical. I don't think noses can be that big or that small, but we're doing it anyway. So let's say you show everyone pictures with noses from like 1 inch to 10 inches, and you say to them, okay, here's all these noses, pick your favorite. And it comes out, it's like, oh, 5-inch noses are the favorite. And everyone's like, oh, great. Everyone loves a 5-inch nose. If you don't have a 5-inch nose, you're hideous. And they forget that there was a lot more going on in that data set. There were plenty of people down here at the 1-inch end, plenty of people up here at the 10-inch end, and lots of people in between. And all this headline of this study's done is take the average and package it up to you. in the real world, these people still exist, and these people still exist. And while it all might average out to this being the favourite, there are still people for who this is the favourite, and still people for who this is the favourite. Those are real people that exist, and their preferences are completely valid and there. And if you have these features, there are people who will love you for it. It's like if a study says people prefer red cars, that doesn't mean there aren't people out there who are going to buy yellow and blue and black cars, because there are. And just because you have a preference for one thing, that doesn't mean you can't like other things as well, you know? Overall in life, I don't think you can be defeatist. You just need to find the right people who are looking for what you have to offer. And trust me, there are people out there who will want it and want you and love you for who you are. You need to stop seeing women, especially ones who are so different to you, as competition to be belittled, because that helps absolutely no one, including yourself. I know some people will sit here and be like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say these things. But honestly, I can say these things because I've literally experienced all of this and gone through all these emotions and these feelings, and I understand where these women are coming from, and I've felt so many of the same things that they have, and some days I still do. It's not an easy thing that you just get over, but I have put in the work, and I keep putting in the work to be better and be happier and be more confident and to accept myself for who I am and to not compare myself to other people. And that's what I think is so important. And like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. That's what I want people to take away from this video. It's kind of like a message of hope, and for them to know that these things are possible, and you don't just have to be all, it's over, life is terrible, especially not when you're really young. If you're like 70 and you feel like you've wasted your life, then yeah, I'm gonna let you wallow and be a little bit bitter and sad about that. But if you're 20 and you're still struggling and you're having a hard time, it's okay, because you still have your entire life ahead of you, and it can get better, and it will get better. You just need to go out there and do new things and meet new people and just learn to accept yourself a little bit more and be cool with yourself, you know? I know it's easier said than done, but it is possible, because I did it. But yeah, anyway, I'm probably rambling now. This is where I'm going to end this today. Sorry if this has been quite long, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments and what you think of these posts, these forums, the concept of femcels in general. Let me know what you think. But thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate you a hell of a lot, and I will see you again very, very soon.